No, that's true.
Thank you all for being here. The members are gathered here on this cold night, and all of you are as well, to mark a very sad anniversary of sorts. A little more than 70 days ago, this group gathered to remember the October 7th attacks on the Jewish people. And here we are again, because there are still Jewish sons and daughters being held captive by Hamas. Kiefer Vivas is one of those being held in captivity. He's just turned 1 year old. Hamas took him hostage 4 months ago, and his parents are now remembering his birthday, hoping he'll be back in their arms soon. We're here again because there are still Americans and Israelis who have not spoken to their families for 103 days. Some of those families are here with us today. They're standing with us. We're here because Hamas is still terrorizing the Jewish people and threatening the state of Israel. It was a bipartisan group who stood here 70 days ago, and it's still a bipartisan group because Congress is united in its opposition to Jewish hatred and in support for our friend and ally, Israel. Since becoming Speaker, I've been able to work with many of my Democrat colleagues to advocate for the safety and security of Israel. And sadly, there are some who continue to sympathize with Hamas. Their actions and their rhetoric, which are shocking, remind us exactly why we need a vigil like this. As we continue our work to counter anti-Semitism at home and abroad, we must continue to speak the truth about what Hamas did on October 7th. In the aftermath of the attacks, we've heard shocking details about the widespread, unspeakable violence that Hamas terrorists committed against innocent civilians. The details of this are difficult to repeat, but they must be faced. We learned that women had their pelvic bones broken by terrorists who raped them. Those animals beheaded babies. Hamas forced children to watch their parents get tortured and murdered, and they made parents watch the murder of their children. They savagely aimed their weapons at Jewish women's genitals and fired mercilessly. This attack, the first of its kind since the Holocaust, came because of anti-Jewish hatred, and it is our duty to call out this evil. If we don't condemn it, if we don't understand what brought it about, if we don't look at it and call it what it is, then anti-Semitic forces will continue to their global rampage unabated. We must listen to the stories of Israelis who witnessed this mass murder. We have to testify with the women who've been beaten, tortured, and kept in cages as hostages in Gaza. We must hear the cries of the young Jewish boys whose legs were branded on the exhaust pipes of motorcycles so Hamas captors can track them and prevent their escape. We must remember, we must testify to these evils, and we must defeat those who seek to perpetrate them. We testify today remembering also that next Saturday is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. As we remember the deaths of 6 million Jews, we acknowledge that the existence of the Jewish people is once again threatened. Hamas and Hezbollah, with the support of Iran, are leading a global effort to erase Israel and the Jewish people. Simultaneously, global institutions like the United Nations and the International Criminal Court are platforming anti-Semites who want to blame Israel for what happened on October 7th and who make no effort to hold Hamas accountable for its atrocities. Congress will not be quiet. We will not tolerate it. We must stand together in solidarity with the Jewish people, and we will. From the synagogues in Brooklyn to the country churches of my home in Northwest Louisiana, from the Senate to the House, we support Israel, believing that we can overcome the darkness with light. At this point, I'd like to invite my colleague and friend, Congressman Agar, to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Leader Jeffries, Whip Clark, and the House Democratic Caucus, tonight we stand here united in grief for the victims of October 7th attack and their loved ones. These last 100 days have been trying for so many of us. We come together today to leave no doubt that when it comes to the safety and security of the people of Israel, we must leave partisanship aside. It is our responsibility to defend our country's strongest ally in the Middle East, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans. House Democrats will continue to extend the hand of partnership across the aisle whenever and wherever possible. Defeating Hamas and the terrorist threat will require bipartisan cooperation. Putting an end to the rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia will require bipartisan cooperation. Ensuring a lasting and sustainable peace in the Middle East will require bipartisan cooperation. Together, we will work toward a brighter future for our allies and for the Israeli people. And our commitment to Israel will never waver. I'd now like to introduce Congressman David Kustoff.
Mr. Speaker, thank you and Leader Jeffries for organizing us to speak this evening. It's been over 100 days now since Hamas's brutal attack on Israel that left nearly 1,200 innocent men, women, and children murdered and 240 individuals kidnapped. Yesterday, I took to the House floor to mark this solemn day. As we all know, on the morning of October 7th, barbaric extremists murdered individuals and families in cold blood. They raped women. They beheaded infants. They mutilated bodies. They burned people in their homes and their cars. And they abducted men, women, and children and the elderly. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an incredible statement to make, but more Jews were murdered on October the 7th than on any other single day since the Holocaust. An incredible statement to make. Today, 136 innocent hostages still remain in Hamas's captivity in Gaza, enduring unthinkable torture and trauma. To the families of the hostages here today and elsewhere, our hearts ache with yours. We will not rest until every single one of your loved ones return home. To the hostages, we are waiting for you and we are fighting for you each and every day until you come home. The United States must continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with our strongest ally in the Middle East. And we will always support Israel in her efforts to eradicate Hamas and bring all the hostages home safely. Today, we can all say with one unified voice, it's time to bring them all home. Thank you very much. And at this time, I'd like to bring forward Congresswoman Kathy Manchin.
Dear friends, thank you for being here tonight to stand with the Jewish community, the hostages, their families, and with Israel during this dark time. I stand here with a heavy heart. I have spent the day meeting with the families of young girls who have been held captive for 103 days since they were kidnapped on October 7th, the infamous day when thousands of Hamas terrorists invaded Israel, slaughtered, sexually assaulted, mutilated, and burned more than 1,200 people. Hearing the stories of these families, imagining what is happening to their girls, and wondering how I would have the strength to go on if I knew my precious daughters were being kept underground, hungry, alone, in pain, tortured, and violated. I am overwhelmed by their grief, by their courage, by the shared pain felt by the entire Jewish community and the bipartisan group of Congress members here on these steps. For years, I have recited the prayer for the captives at synagogue, just as Jews have been praying for the release of the captives for thousands of years. It has always been a part of our liturgy. Yet since October 7th, this ancient prayer has taken on new urgency. And so I want to offer a modern version of this prayer. Adonai, we call out to you with fervent plea and prayer to bless and protect the civilian men, women, and children brutally kidnapped by Hamas and held captive in Gaza, along with the members of Israel's defense forces missing in action or held captive. May it be your will to bring them home speedily, out from darkness and the shadow of death. May the Holy One break their bonds, deliver them from their distress, and release them swiftly back to the loving embrace of their dear ones. Do all that must be done so that relief, rescue, and long life may be the lot of every one of the soldiers and civilians who have been taken hostage. Act on their behalf, O Lord. Take up their cause without delay, so that you fulfill through them your verse from Isaiah. Those redeemed by the Lord will return. They will enter Zion with singing, and everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. Thank you. I'll turn it over to my colleague next moment.
Thank you all for being here. On October 7th, Hamas's cowardly acts of bloodshed reminded the world that they are a murderous terrorist group, and that's what they are, and that's what they need to be addressed as, a murderous terrorist group that needs to be eradicated. You've heard 1,200 people were slaughtered, including 30 Americans, and I repeat, 30 Americans. Nearly 250 were taken captive, and many more, as you have already heard, were raped and brutally abused. Some try to compare Israel's war against Hamas terrorists to evil acts, but there is no comparison. We stand here united behind us bipartisanly to make sure that these hostages can come home and to support our greatest ally in the Middle East, Israel. And there's one more thing that I'd like to say. As someone who's Jewish, if you are Jewish, and if you have a family member who's Jewish, or if you have a friend who is Jewish, don't be afraid. Look behind me, look at this Congress, and know that we stand with the Jewish people. And to the families, there's nothing that I can say, and there's nothing anyone behind me can say that is going to make this okay for anybody. But you have us. And I can tell you one thing, being a Jew and being a proud Jew, we always make it out of this because we stick together and we always overcome hate at every single obstacle that has ever come our way. God bless the United States and God bless Israel. Am Yisrael Chai. Speaker.